instructions on our website, thefun.org, THEFFUN.org. You may know that our congregation shares a portion of its offering plate every month with an organization that works to further our values in the wider community. This month, our Share the Plate recipient is the congregation's NOAH Action Team. NOAH stands for Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, and you can read a little bit more about them in your order of service. As always, your generosity, like your presence here today with us, is received with gratitude.
So Hosea tried, he really did, not to jump in the mud anymore like his father asked him. But sometimes it was just there. He would try not to even look at it, not because then he would want to jump in it. But then he would be walking along and he wouldn't see it and he would step right in it. And then he was like, well, I'm already a little muddy, so why don't I just jump in it? And so he would. And his sisters, again, went to his father and they were like, Father, Hosea is jumping in the mud again. Please, can you talk to him? We're doing so much laundry. And his father goes to him and he's a little bit more stern this time. And he's like, Hosea, please try not to play in the mud. And Hosea goes, Father, I did try. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Are you very angry with me? And his father said, Hosea, he gave him the worst line of all, Hosea, I am disappointed in you. And I am a little angry. And Hosea, oh, do you still love me? His father said, yes, Hosea, of course I love you. I'll love you no matter what you do. Hosea said, will you love me even if I get muddy again? And he's like, yes. He's like, will you love me even if I get really, really muddy? He's like, yes, Hosea. Will you love me even if I jump right in the puddle and I get it between my toes and behind my knees and in my armpits and behind my ears? It's like, Hosea, I will love you no matter what you do or how muddy you get. But please, try to stay clean. And Hosea tried as he got older, and he didn't like to jump in the mud so much. But he still loved to ask lots of questions.
So I talked about Norbert a little while ago. What I didn't mention was his last name. I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to ask you to pronounce it after me. Gyauch. You may hear it differently, but it was Gyauch. Norbert Gyauch. So, he and Maya had built this church, and it was a place where many, many people finally found a place where they were comfortable and they felt they belonged. They, like Norbert, had been in other religions that didn't fit, maybe sometimes even caused them harm. And so they came to this church. It was a very plain church. No crosses, no bells, no elaborate tapestries, very plain, hard wooden chairs. And they would come, and Norbert would preach, and then they would talk, and really, that was their service. Well, this is coming up now on World War II, and things were starting to get quite uncomfortable for many people. And Norbert was very much aware of this, and it made his heart heavy. He wanted to help his congregation, even if only for a short time. And so one day he was out walking. It was a little rainy, those kinds of days where there's some rain but the sun is still shining. And he was walking along and he saw flowers everywhere, every color. He saw great big sunflowers and peonies and iris and all of these beautiful flowers. And he had an idea. So what he did, the next Sunday, he went back to the church and he told everyone, next week, bring a flower with you, a twig, a bud, just bring something with you. And they said, but what kind? What should we bring? And he said, anything you want, anything at all. Okay. And the next week they all came, they all had many, many different flowers, and they put them all together into one beautiful bouquet. And Norbert explained to them that that bouquet was them, all different, all unique, all beautiful, and together, even more beautiful. And so just for that short time, that gathered community, they forgot their cares and their worries, and they just sat together in the love that they shared.
I'd like to invite you to join me in singing De Colores, but I'd like you to use the words on your insert. This Mexican folk song, we're going to sing the Spanish verse, which you might be used to, and if you are overwhelmed by Spanish, do the best you can. It's okay. What's important is your voice is in the room. The second verse, which is in your order of service, has rooster and chicken and chick calls in it. Did you know that animals say different things in different languages? So let's practice. El gallo. El gallo. Canta el gallo. Canta el gallo. Kiri, kiri, kiri. Kiri, kiri. La gallina. La gallina. Cara, cara, cara. Cara, cara, cara. Los polluelos.
Hosea Ballou grew up a little bit. He was a teenager, so, take that with a grain of salt. And he didn't like playing in mud very much anymore, but he did like playing in questions, big questions. So one day he went up to his father, who again was a Baptist preacher, and he was like, "Father, got a stumper for you. Why does our church believe that God would only let 1 in 1,000 people into heaven if way more people than that might be good?" And his father didn't really have an answer. He was like, "Oh." And Hosea was like, "Father, I got another one for you. If I had the power to create a living being, and I knew that it was going to have a hard life, that it would suffer and die, and then I knew it would go to HE double hockey sticks and be miserable forever, and I still created that creature, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? Would I be good or bad?" And his father wasn't sure again. He was, and so because his father didn't quite have the answers that Hosea was looking for, he went to some different kinds of churches. He visited a Universalist church. And as he read the Bible and kind of thought for himself for a while, he decided he believed in what's called universal salvation, which is that God's love is so big and so out of our imagination that he'll cover everybody. It's cool. Everybody gets saved. Nobody goes to HE double hockey sticks. So it's great. Unless you like hockey, then it's fine. So finally he goes back to his father, and he tells him, "Father, I believe," oh, wait, need the hat. "Father, I believe in universal salvation," which is different than his father believed in. The Baptists, not all of them think that. And his father goes, "Hosea, how can you think that? How can you think that God would let even bad people into heaven?" And Hosea goes, "Well, Father, just like when I was little and I would jump into mud and make a huge mess, and you told me that you would love me no matter what, God's like that. God maybe is occasionally disappointed, even a little angry with us, but he loves us so much, and I don't believe he would ever do something to hurt us." And he grew up, and thanks to his, oh, wait, gotta take that off. And he grew up, and thanks to his father and all of his love, he was able to spread this message to lots of people who needed to hear it.
So things were getting bad in Czechoslovakia, and even more terrible times were coming. Maya went back to the United States to raise money for refugees. And while she was there, the Nazis invaded and occupied Czechoslovakia, and she could not get back home. Meanwhile, Norbert, he's a really good Unitarian. He really believed what we now call the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. But the Gestapo thought that was a very dangerous idea. You can imagine, anyone's going to figure it out for themselves, do what they want to do. So Norbert kept it quiet. He didn't make too much of a fuss. He still formed a resistance committee to help Czechs escape, but he stayed just below the radar until one day in 1941, he just could not stand it anymore, and he preached from the pulpit about a speech that Hitler had just made. It took only 5 days for the Gestapo to come and take him. They sent him to Dachau, and the notation next to his name said, "Return not wanted." Well, Norbert was over 70 at this point, but those who survived talk about how he was a source of great comfort and kindness and compassion to his fellow inmates. And although he died in that camp, his legacy lives on. Maya was still in the United States, and while she dearly, dearly missed her husband, she took that flower ceremony, flower festival, flower communion, and she gave it to all of us. And so today, we can thank the Czechoslovakian Unitarians, Norbert and Maya Čapek, for creating the flower communion and for bringing it to us.
While choir ascends, I'm going to invite all y'all to become also part of choir. Thank you. So, this is the oldest written, notated, multi-part song known to history. And since today we're talking about history, I thought this would be an appropriate anthem for our choir to sing. And you're going to help us sing it. Are you ready? Can I have a D? So your part goes like this. First we'll start with the words. Sing cuckoo. So the whole thing is sing cuckoo, new sing cuckoo. Sing cuckoo, new sing cuckoo. All right, and your part goes like this. Sing cuckoo, new sing cuckoo. Sing cuckoo, new sing cuckoo. Again. Sing cuckoo, new sing cuckoo. Great. So this half, you guys were the second part, right? You're the second part, and you're the first part. You have a couple of people to watch their mouths for where you're supposed to be. And you know what? If you're singing Sing Cuckoo, we're all good, right? So, we're going to start over here with Sing Cuckoo, new Sing Cuckoo, and then you guys are going to come in when I come, right? You ready? Are you excited? Yeah. All right. And we have Baxter playing penny whistle for us. So we're going to get started, and then all the rest of the music is going to happen. Are you ready? 1, 2, ready, go. Sing cuckoo, sing cuckoo, new sing cuckoo, sing cuckoo, sing cuckoo, sing cuckoo, sing cuckoo, sing cuckoo.
my way of thinking, anytime you sing medieval music, it's a good day. Thank you, choir. That was fun. So I really like these two stories we heard today because they're stories about who we are. I don't know if you noticed, but we had a story about a Universalist, that was Hosea Ballou, and a story about a Unitarian, Norbert Gyauch. Who knew I'd been saying his name wrong all these years? And they're stories that blend lots of different elements from the history that comes eventually in the middle of the 20th century to make up Unitarian Universalism. In Norbert Gyauch, we have some of those ancient Unitarian roots from Eastern Europe combined with training in America. He for a while lived in America, and that's where he became a Unitarian minister. And in Hosea Ballou, you have that New England, New Hampshire farm boy grown up to be convinced of universal salvation. So Hosea Ballou went on and had a long, distinguished career, not as a mud puddle jumper, but as a pastor and a theologian. He served lots of different Universalist churches around New England and ended up with very long time at I think it was the Second Universalist Church in Boston. It was a church in Boston. It was a big one. And in Norbert Gyauch, we have this founding of it was actually, Marguerite said, the biggest Unitarian church in Czechoslovakia at the time. It was actually probably one of the biggest Unitarian churches ever, really, anywhere in the world. In 1930, it was officially recognized by the Czechoslovakian government. So it was a long way from Norbert's boyhood, where being anything other than Roman Catholic was kind of suspect, according to the government. And I love the creation of flower communion, that response to a concern that people gathering for what some people felt were just lectures. These are people who'd come from lots of different religious traditions in which they had felt hurt or neglected or set aside or thrown out, the way that Norbert was thrown out of his uncle's household. Those people gathered, and in looking for a form of worship that they could all benefit from and grow in together. No ministers wore robes. They didn't do anything that reminded them of their other religious lives. They somehow felt they were missing something. So their pastors created a brand new thing for them, this flower communion ceremony that we still do today, because it still speaks to our hearts. It speaks to who we are as a people, individually and together. So these are two stories of finding hope and building lives in very different contexts, but with a great deal of creativity and attention to people's needs. These are beautiful growth out of two very different stories with a variety of challenges. These are inspiring examples, both of these people, and Norbert and Maya, and they're of our own values. So I think immediately of the search for truth and meaning. This is our second principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. You see in all of these people a willingness to listen for the inner voice, to think things through for themselves, to ask lots of questions. Sometimes that search requires you to leave home. Sometimes it means you return home, the way the Gyauchs went back to Czechoslovakia. And it almost always leads, as I said before, to some creative adaptation. Ballou was a theological innovator. I don't know if you noticed, but Reverend Gail talked about him in her sermon a week or two ago when she was talking about atonement. That was Hosea Ballou's theology that she was working out of. The Gyauchs innovated ecclesiastically, liturgically. They created a thing for a gathered community in worship to do together, to celebrate their community. And they both worked always with a sense of commitment to finding truth and justice and love in their communities and in their world. So Hosea Ballou left us with a theology that is not bound up, or a little less bound up, in shame and guilt and fear. This universalism, he didn't create universalism, but he did work with it and write on it and teach on it in a way that was, it was foundational for our own movement as Unitarian Universalists. And Gyauch left us with this flower communion, which we do every single year here, and I think almost all UU congregations celebrate flower communion in the spring. It's a legacy of creating what works for long-term growth. It's a legacy of paying attention to your life and listening to the questions that arise from that life, looking for truth and meaning and justice, and finding new ways to create it, always. And I would like to sum up actually with the sentence that Marguerite Mills gave me while we were putting this sentence together. She said that what these stories teach us is that we all have the right, the privilege, the duty, the responsibility to engage in the work of becoming. And that work of becoming is ultimately the work of blooming. So look at these flowers. They were pretty all by themselves, individually, as we carried them in, but together, they are something else entirely. They are amazing, and so are we. May it be so.
I'd like to invite you to take out your order of service, your insert, and open up to the Bouquet of Humanity. This song was written for Flower Communion by Unitarian Universalists, Scott Rowe and Mary Courtney. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me and the choir in singing the Bouquet of Humanity.
In a moment, we are going to, some of us, process with these flowers out to our columbarium, symbolic of our connection to those ancestors locally in this congregation who have gone before us. I will note now that if you do not want to go out into the columbarium with us, you're welcome to remain in your seats here inside. We will have the microphone out there with us, and so just know that that is an option for you. Before we go out, I think we have some flower bearers ready. Amanda, why don't your crew come down here and you'll be ready to go out. We have wonderful helpers this morning. Before we go out, we're going to bless the flowers using a prayer written by Norbert Gyauch. Yay. Do we have enough? We need a couple more people. Anyone want to help? Here we go. Two more. I think we've got it covered. Let's see, this is a big one. Okay, why don't you all stand close together so it's your one big bouquet. All right. Let us pray together over these flowers that are symbolic of us. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us amid diversities of knowledge and of gifts to be one in desire and affection and devotion to thy holy will. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendship as one of thy most precious gifts. May we not let awareness of one another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship, but may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do thy work in this world. Amen. Blessed be. Let us go out or stay in as you wish. Okay. Those of you inside can also go out the back door if that's faster for you. The people online are sharing this with us, so we ask that everyone stay out of the line between me and the camera here as much as you can. There's a camera inside. All right. We have entered into the communion of flowers. We have entered with joyful hearts and good stories. We have entered with reverent thoughts. It has taken long months beneath cold ground for these flowers to prepare their blooming. Like Hosea Ballou and Norbert Chapek before us, it has taken each of us a long time of growth through sorrow and joy to prepare for our living now. The blooming season is short. The flowers stay only a brief time. We are travelers upon the earth, and we stay only a brief time. Therefore, we acknowledge not only our connections to the other living things on this earth, but also our connections to the ancestors. Well-known Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists throughout history who have illustrated creative possibilities for seeking truth and building communities of love and justice, but also those who more closely tied to us in time and in space, who, having been beloved members of this particular, unique, and beautiful bud of Unitarian Universalism, which is this church, this congregation here, we remember all of them in this garden that surrounds us now. Let us rejoice in the beauty that surrounds us and the beauty that we are. let us celebrate together in love the strength and courage we find in the web of connections that holds us always in love.
The words to your chalice extinguishing can be found at the bottom of your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our benediction is adapted again by something written by Norbert Chapek, the founder of our flower communion. In the name of Providence, which implants in the seed the future of the flower, and in our hearts the memory for people to live in harmony. In our hearts the longing for people to live in harmony. In the name of the highest, in whom we move, and who makes the parents, the siblings, lovers, and loners what they are. In the name of sages and great religious leaders who sacrificed their lives to hasten the coming of the age of mutual respect, let us renew our resolution sincerely to be real siblings, regardless of any kind of bar which estranges us from each other. In this holy resolve, may we be strengthened, knowing that we are one family, that one spirit, the spirit of love, unites us, and endeavor for a more perfect and more joyful life. Amen. Our service is over. Let our service be renewed and emboldened by the joy we have shared together. Go in peace.